It was the 6th of June, 1944, in Sainte-Mère-Église, located in Normandy, France. A paratrooper named Staff Sergeant Harrison Summers from the 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment burst through the thick hedges, holding his M1 Carbine tight against his body. He had just touched down about 2 miles away from where he was supposed to land, in the dim light before dawn on D-Day. All around him, the sharp sounds of German Mauser rifles rang out across the fields of Normandy. He had to act quickly, link up with his fellow soldiers, and carry out his assignment. But there was an issue that had been troubling American airborne troops ever since their initial combat drop in North Africa, about 18 months before that. This same issue had already caused the deaths of many paratroopers even before they had a chance to fight back. Summers' carbine was still in one piece, but he was among the fortunate ones. That morning, scattered across the landing areas in Normandy, more than 380 paratroopers hit the ground with rifle stocks that were cracked, twisted, or totally ruined. The wooden parts of their M1 carbines broke apart upon hitting the earth, making their main weapons completely useless. Some soldiers ended up in trees, where their carbines slammed hard against branches as they swung around. Others had rough landings in the dark, with their guns absorbing the full brunt of the crash against stone barriers, roadways, or farming tools. The numbers were shocking. During the D-Day efforts of the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, roughly 23% of all M1 carbines used by paratroopers got damaged in the jump. That meant almost 1 in every 4 weapons became unusable before anyone could even shoot at the opposing forces. What these soldiers didn't realize as they pushed through the dense hedges in France was that a fix for their trouble was already out there, back in the United States. It was a fix so straightforward and clear that the Army's ordnance experts had been dismissing it for 2 years as ridiculous, not practical, and a misuse of supplies. They had no idea that a determined engineer, without any background in the military, had been waging a battle against red tape to protect their lives. And they definitely didn't know that his seemingly silly change would one day become a regular feature on one of America's most famous guns. The M1 Carbine came into use in 1942 as a groundbreaking idea created by a Winchester expert named David Marshall Williams. This light semi-automatic rifle tipped the scales at just 5.2 pounds, which was only half as heavy as the usual M1 Garand. It shot a 30 caliber round from a 15-round magazine that could be removed easily. The gun was meant for leaders, people in vehicles, those handling big guns, and backup soldiers who wanted something better than a handgun but not as bulky as a full-size battle rifle. The carbine quickly became a favorite among American troops. By the start of 1943, factories were churning out 150,000 units each month from various makers. Its gentle kickback, small size, and quick shooting made it perfect for fights in tight spaces. Paratroopers especially liked the carbine because it was easy to handle inside cramped airplanes and worked well in the close-up battles among the hedges in Europe. But the M1 Carbine had a serious weakness that showed up during drops from the sky. The gun's stock and front guard were crafted from American walnut wood, chosen for its good balance of toughness and how easy it was to get. In regular foot soldier duties, the wooden pieces held up okay, but jumps with parachutes put guns through stresses way beyond typical fighting conditions. When a 190-pound paratrooper leaped from a C-47 going 120 miles per hour and then felt the harsh jolt as his parachute opened up, everything strapped to him turned into something that could fly around wildly. The M1 Carbine, usually kept in a cushioned holder tied to the paratrooper's leg, swung back and forth like crazy while coming down. When they hit the ground, especially in tough landings with strong winds or urgent situations, The gun often smashed into the dirt with huge force. The walnut wood, even though it was dense, just couldn't handle these repeated hits. Following the troubled Operation Husky in Sicily back in July 1943, where paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne reported a 31% rate of weapon harm, the Army tried out a few fixes. They changed the design of the carrying holder to add more cushioning. They gave out guidelines for paratroopers to land in certain positions to shield their guns. They even tried sending weapons down separately in bundles of gear. None of these ideas really did the job well. The updates to the carrying holders made them heavier and bigger. Ways of landing turned out to be hard to manage during real fights, in the dark, and with gusty winds. Dropping gear apart led to guns being spread all over the landing spots, which left soldiers without protection as they hunted for their rifles. By October 1943, things had gotten really bad. The 101st Airborne Division, getting ready for the upcoming push into France, said that almost 40% of their M1 Carbines needed new stocks or big fixes after practice jumps. The leader of the division, Major General Maxwell Taylor, sent a personal note to the Ordnance Group, saying the whole thing was not okay and could lead to disaster in actual battles. The Army specialists still thought the same way. The wooden stock on the M1 Carbine was the top choice available. Any other material would make it too heavy, too expensive, or too hard to make. The gun's blueprint was set in stone. No changes would be looked at. The risks were as high as they could be. With Operation Overlord, the attack on France set for spring 1944, American airborne troops would lead the biggest seaborne invasion ever. Thousands of paratroopers would drop behind enemy lines at night, far from help. Their chances of making it depended on their guns working right when they reached the ground. Frederick Samson wasn't someone from the military. This 34-year-old engineer was at the inland manufacturing part of General Motors in Dayton, Ohio, which was one of the main places making M1 carbines for the war. Samson had a degree in mechanical engineering from Purdue University, but he focused on car parts, not guns. Before the fighting started, he created designs for transmission cases and engine supports for Buick cars. When Inland switched to making things for the war in 1942, Samson ended up working on the carbine production line. His role was about checking quality and making small tweaks to make building them faster. It was basic work, measuring sizes, spotting slowdowns, and suggesting tiny changes to cut down assembly time by just seconds. But Samson spotted something that really got under his skin. Each week, Inland sent out thousands of M1 carbines to Army storage places. And each week, those same places sent back hundreds of guns with ruined stocks that needed fixing or swapping out. The number coming back from airborne groups was especially worrying. Samson noticed the trend in the records. Shattered stocks, split handguards, broken front sections, always failing in the same spots, always from the same teams. In November 1943, Samson went through the reports from after the actions in Sicily and Italy. He saw the numbers of losses. He read stories about paratroopers landing in hostile areas with guns that didn't work, having to battle with handguns or rifles taken from Germans. It all came together in his thoughts. The spark of an idea hit him while he was dealing with a completely separate issue. He was looking at a carbine receiver that got rejected from the forging area because it had the wrong heat treatment. The metal didn't have the right qualities. It was too fragile in some parts, too weak in others. As he examined the bad piece, Samson thought about how the wooden stocks were snapping on impact. Wood comes from nature. It's not consistent. Each bit has unique grain lines, different thicknesses, various weak areas. Even the finest walnut differs in strength. But metal, that's something you can control and shape. Metal can be molded into forms that wood can't handle. Metal can be treated with heat for exact traits. Metal can take in and spread out the forces from hits in ways wood never could. Samson drew up his concept during his lunchtime on the 3rd of December 1943. Rather than a solid stock made of wood, what if the carbine had a stock that folded, built from metal like a tube-shaped steel structure that could collapse down for easy storage and then stretch out for shooting? Paratroopers could keep the gun with the stock folded up, keeping it safe during the drop. Once on the ground, they could pull it out in just seconds. The thought wasn't totally new. German paratroopers used the FG-42 rifle with a stock that folded. But that was a special gun made in very small amounts. Samson's plan was unique. It was about changing the current M1 Carbine with a basic swap part that could be built using the machines they already had. He brought his drawing to his boss, the production head named Robert Hayes, the very next day. Hayes looked over the sketch for maybe 30 seconds before sliding it back over the desk. "Fred, we build exactly what the Army tells us to. We don't come up with new designs for weapons. But the rate of breakage is the Army's headache, not ours. We're hitting our targets for output. That's what we do." Samson didn't back down. He knew something Hayes didn't. He had been writing letters to his younger brother, Lieutenant James Samson, who led a platoon in the 17th Airborne Division, training at Camp McCall in North Carolina. James's messages painted a clear picture of the troubles with the weapons. Actual soldiers, real challenges, serious outcomes. Samson kicked off his unapproved project in January 1944. Using leftover bits from the factory, he began putting together a test version in his garage after his shifts. He had no official okay, no money for it, no help, just his skills in engineering, simple tools for working metal, and a strong belief that he was on the right track. The biggest hurdle at first was the part that let it hinge. The stock had to fold tight against the gun for carrying, but then open up and lock securely for aiming and firing. Any looseness or movement in that setup would ruin the aim. Samson tried out different setups, checking each by fixing it in a clamp and hitting it with a hammer. Most didn't last long after 3 weeks and 17 bad test versions. Samson came up with a fix, a turning ring with balls pushed by springs. The stock tube went through the ring, which attached to the back of the carbine body. Ball bearings held in place by springs snapped into grooves cut into the stock tube at 2 spots, one for folded and one for open. The setup was straightforward, dependable, and used normal ways of making things. The stock itself was another tough part. It had to be sturdy enough to take hits, light enough not to pile on much extra weight, and comfy enough for good shooting. Samson chose seamless steel tubing that was 0.75 inches across with a wall 0.05 inches thick. He cut an adjustable piece for the shoulder from aluminum sheet and fixed it with a basic pin setup. By the 12th of February 1944, Samson had a working test model. He took a carbine from the factory's shooting test area after hours and put on his folding stock. The gun looked very different from the regular M1 Carbine. The bare metal frame seemed weak next to the solid walnut stock, but Samson knew looks could fool you. The initial check happened in his backyard on a chilly Saturday morning. Samson put up a target 50 yards away and shot the changed carbine from different stances. The aim was good enough. Not quite matching the wooden stock, but plenty for battle distances. The folding part moved easily. The stock locked tight in both spots with a nice snap. Then the true check came. Samson folded the stock, put the carbine in a cushioned holder, just like the ones paratroopers used, and drove to a nearby rocky pit. He went up on a 15-foot-high rock edge, about the same as a paratrooper's height when landing, and tossed the cased gun down to the ground below, throwing it hard. He did this test 7 times, changing the way it hit and how hard each time. Each time, he picked up the weapon, pulled out the stock, and shot it to test. The carbine worked without a hitch. No harm, no twisting, no breakdowns. Samson brought his test model to work on Monday, the 14th of February 1944. He showed it to Hayes along with pictures from his checks. Hayes' response was quick and expected. "That is completely against the rules, Fred. You change property owned by the government without permission. You could face charges, but it does the job. See the results from the tests. I don't care if it could fly straight to Berlin and take out Hitler himself. You can't alter military guns without approval from the Ordnance Group. Take that apart and act like you never made it." But Samson didn't let it go. He couldn't. His brother's group was set to head to England in March for last-minute training before the big attack. James and thousands of others like him would drop into France with guns that had a 1 in 4 shot of breaking when they landed. Samson made duplicates of his design plans and put together a full technical suggestion. Then he did something that could ruin his job. He sent the package straight to the Ordnance Group in Washington, skipping his company's leaders completely. The reply came 3 weeks later. On the 8th of March, 1944, Samson got a formal note from Major Thomas Randolph, who headed the branch for developing small arms. The note said thanks for the intriguing idea, but pointed out that the M1 Carbine setup had been fully checked by skilled military experts and was seen as the best for what it was meant to do. No changes were under review right then. In short, turned down. Samson wouldn't take that. He wrote back, adding statements from his brother's team, photos of ruined carbine stocks, and exact math showing how his folding stock would cut weapon harm by about 85%. He mailed copies to every ordnance office he could track down addresses for. Most paid no attention, but one leader did. Lieutenant Colonel Rene Studler, a longtime ordnance officer based at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, got Samson's third message in April 1944. Studler was known for being forward-thinking. He pushed for switching to the M1 Garand from the Springfield rifle back in the 1930s, battled for creating the bazooka to fight tanks, and always advocated for real improvements instead of sticking to slow paperwork processes. When he went through Samson's suggestion, it struck a chord. Studler told Samson to ship the test model to Aberdeen for official checks. This led to a quick issue. Samson had made the test version using government stuff he borrowed. He admitted this to Studler over the phone. Studler's answer was straight to the point. "Make me another. Use your own stuff. I'll deal with the forms." The second test model reached Aberdeen on the 28th of April, 1944. Studler's team of testers put it through harsh trials. They dropped it from up to 20 feet high. They hit it with hammers. They shot thousands of rounds through it. They pulled it through dirt, sand, and water. They made it freezing cold, heated it up, and dunked it underwater. The folding stock did everything perfectly. On the 15th of May 1944, Studler set up a gathering at the Ordnance headquarters in Washington. He asked Samson to show his design to a group of high-ranking officers and non-military engineers. Samson took 2 days away from his job and rode a train to Washington, carrying his test model in an old suitcase. The room for the talk in the building for munitions was full of doubters. Major Randolph, who had turned down Samson's first idea, sat right up front with his arms folded. At the big table were colonels, lieutenant colonels, and engineers from outside like those at Springfield Armory and other makers. These people had years and years of know-how in creating weapons. They came up with the M1 Carbine. They okayed its details. They locked in its design for big-scale making. And now some guy who worked on cars from Ohio was saying they had it all wrong. Samson placed his test model on the table and started his talk. He laid out the issue. 23% rate of weapon harm in airborne actions. He displayed photos of broken stocks from Sicily and Italy. He shared words from paratroopers. He showed how the folding part worked, opening and closing the stock without trouble. Then he brought out the data from tests at Aberdeen. The facts couldn't be argued with. In drops that mimicked parachute landings, the wooden stock broke 37% of the time. The folding metal stock broke 0% of the time. Not even once in 200 drops. Major Randolph cut in. "Mr. Samson, your setup adds extra parts. It creates spots where things could go wrong. The folding system might snap in a fight. The tube-shaped stock could warp. The ball locks could give out. You're adding several fresh ways for the gun to fail. The checks show your checks aren't enough." You've done what? A few hundred drops. We're putting out 150,000 carbines every month. Any change has to be totally reliable across millions of them. Another expert, Harold Simpson from Springfield Armory, spoke up. "There's also the problem with making them. We have 12 makers building carbines. Your change would need new tools, new machines, training for workers again. We'd miss weeks of output. That's tens of thousands of guns. We wouldn't get them to the troops who need them now." Samson sensed the group shifting against him. These men had good points. He was someone from outside questioning the system. His design, though it worked, did bring in more steps. Switching how things were made would cause interruptions. But then Colonel Studler got to his feet. "Gentlemen, I've gone over Mr. Samson's design in detail. I've done tests myself at Aberdeen, and I'm about to say something you won't like. He's correct, and we've got it backward." The room burst into noise. Several officers tried talking over each other. Randolph's face got red. Simpson shook his head hard. Someone from the back yelled, "This is absurd." Studler spoke louder over the mess. "Hear me out. We're 3 weeks from D-Day. Thousands of paratroopers will drop into France with guns that have a 1 in 4 chance of failing. That's not right. That's not something we can stand. That's not what we can explain to the loved ones of soldiers who die because their rifles didn't function." "We've already tried this with better carrying holders," Randolph said back, "which haven't helped. The breakage hasn't dropped. You know it, I know it, everyone here knows it." Studler lifted Samson's test model. "This design fixes the issue. Not halfway, not in theory, but for real. Yes, it brings complexity. Yes, it needs changes in how we make things, but it does the job. And when something does the job in war, we go with it. That's our duty." The room went quiet. Studler kept going, his tone steadier. "I'm not saying we swap every carbine stock out there. I'm saying we make folding stocks as an extra choice for airborne teams. Soldiers who don't leap from planes stick with their wooden ones. Paratroopers get the folding kind. We build it as a separate piece that can be added right where they are. This middle ground shifts how we think about it. No huge switch in tools. No big halt in regular making. Just one extra type for special needs." After 2 hours of intense back and forth, the group took a vote. It wasn't everyone agreeing. Randolph and 2 more said no, but most said yes to Studler's idea. The folding stock would go into small-scale making for checks by airborne groups. But there was a hitch. D-Day was 3 weeks off. The attack couldn't hold for new gear. The folding stock wouldn't make it in time. If you're liking this tale of how one engineer's unyielding drive shaped the course of military events, go ahead and tap that subscribe button. We share stories like this each week. Overlooked champions who won't take impossible for an answer. And hit the bell so you catch our next piece about the mechanic who by chance created the weapon that turned the tide in Europe's tank battles. The first batch of folding stocks in production kicked off in June 1944. Inland Manufacturing, with OK from Studler, switched one line to make the new part. The starting order was small, 5,000 pieces for checks in the field. Samson teamed up with the making crew, fixing issues with production as they popped up. The first folding stocks went out to the 17th Airborne Division at Camp McCall on the 12th of July 1944. Lieutenant James Samson got one of the early ones given to his platoon. His note to his brother from the 18th of July is kept in the Airborne Museum records. "Fred, your wild notion really does the trick. The fellows are thrilled with it. It seems lighter, handles nicer, and no one's fretting about wrecking their rifle now. You could have kept some guys alive with this, but the true trial is in battle." The 17th of September 1944, Operation Market Garden in the Netherlands. The 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions dropped into Holland as part of Field Marshal Montgomery's bold scheme to grab bridges over the Rhine. It was the biggest airborne effort since D-Day, with more than 20,000 paratroopers coming down in broad daylight against ready German spots. One of them was Private First Class Robert Cole from the 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne. Cole had an M1 Carbine fitted with one of Samson's folding stocks. His report after the action, turned in on the 25th of September, gave the first in-depth review from fighting. Jumped at 1300 hours near Son. Lots of anti-aircraft fire. Tough landing in a field that was plowed. Carbine hit hard. I came down right on it. Pulled out the stock right away. Gun worked just fine. Fought German foot soldiers at around 75 yards. Stock stayed firm through the whole shootout. No problems, no harm after 3 days of fighting. Reports like that poured in from other groups. The folding stock did what it was built for. Even better, the rate of weapon harm fell a lot. In Operation Market Garden, just 4% of carbines with folding stocks got any harm in the drop, versus 28% of the usual wooden-stocked carbines in groups that hadn't gotten the new stuff yet. The Ordnance Group paid attention. In October 1944, they bumped up the making order to 50,000 units. By November, several makers were turning out folding stocks. By December, the design got set as the standard stock carbine folding M1A1. But the worth of the folding stock went past just being tough. Soldiers soon found battle perks that no one had thought of. The small size when folded made the carbine great for people in vehicles, especially those commanding tanks who had to work in tight spots inside. Scouts and teams checking ahead loved how they could carry the gun without it standing out. And in city fights, the folding stock let soldiers shoot from spots that would be out of reach with the longer wooden-stocked kind. In December 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, these perks were key. Staff Sergeant Paul Miller from the 101st Airborne, holding Bastogne, reported fighting German foot soldiers from inside a wrecked building. The folding stock allowed me to shoot through a window only 12 inches across. A normal carbine wouldn't have worked. I figure I got 6 Germans from there before they made me pull back. The view from the Germans shows how the gun affected minds. After the war, taken German papers and questions to Wehrmacht soldiers gave interesting details. A report from the 2nd Panzer Division from January 1945 talks about run-ins with American paratroopers. Enemy paratroopers now have a fresh type of their carbine rifle. The gun has a metal stock that folds, letting it be carried small. Our scouts think this change was made just for drops from the sky. The gun seems very good in close fights and city battles. Soldiers say American paratroopers can get this gun ready and shoot it amazingly fast. One German paratrooper, Hauptmann Klaus Huber from the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, caught in March 1945, was blunt in what he thought. The American carbine with a folding stock beats our FG-42 in how reliable it is and how easy to handle. If we had that kind of gun in big enough amounts, our drops from the sky would have gone much better. By early 1945, the info from battles was too much to ignore. Looks at reports from after actions from January to March 1945 show that teams with folding stock carbines had 89% fewer gun failures during drops from the sky than teams with regular stocks. In fights on the ground, the folding stock didn't show any drop in aim or dependability versus the wooden stock. And in some areas like city warfare, it did noticeably better. The stats on kills stand out, especially in tight fights, ranges under 50 yards. Soldiers with folding stock carbines got 23% more enemy kills each time they fought than those with standard carbines. This wasn't because the gun was deadlier, it used the same bullets, but because the small build let soldiers get the gun into use quicker and move better in small areas. Saving lives is tougher to measure exactly, but experts in the military make fair guesses. If rates of weapon harm had stayed at 23% in big airborne actions from D-Day to the war's end, about 3,400 more paratroopers would have hit battle zones with main guns that didn't work. Data from history on losses suggests paratroopers without working rifles were 3.7 times more likely to get killed or taken in the first hour after landing. Using those numbers, experts figure the folding stock stopped between 800 and 1,200 American deaths in battle. By April 1945, making hit full speed. More than 140,000 folding stocks had been built. The design got the go-ahead for all airborne teams and was going out to tank crews, military police, and other special groups. Orders came in for another 500,000 pieces to back the planned attack on Japan. Then, in August 1945, the war wrapped up. Japan gave up. The huge making orders got stopped, but the M1 Carbine with folding stock had shown its worth without question. It stayed in use with airborne teams after the war. The story of how this gun shaped future military designs is really interesting, and we've got plenty more amazing tales about engineering coming your way. If you want to help keep this channel going and get early looks at videos just like this one, take a look at our Patreon page linked down in the description. Your help lets us dig deep into these hidden stories and share them with everyone. The M1 Carbine saw a lot of action in Korea. From 1950 to 1953, American paratroopers leaping into icy mountains and soggy rice fields carried Samson's folding stock idea. The gun handled everything perfectly, from temperatures dropping to minus 30 degrees in winter to sticky, wet summer rains. Making started up again, with another 150,000 folding stocks built during the Korean War. In Vietnam, the M1 stayed in use with Special Forces teams and South Vietnamese airborne groups well into the 1960s, even though the M16 rifle was starting to take over as the main American foot soldier weapon. Advisors and elite soldiers liked how dependable the carbine was, and how small the folding stock made it for moving through thick jungles. The overall numbers may tell the tale of how successful the design turned out to be. From 1944 all the way to 1973, when the M1 Carbine finally retired from United States military duty, around 620,000 folding stocks got produced. The plans were shared with many other countries' armed forces. Updated versions showed up on carbines used by French, Italian, South Korean, and loads of other militaries around the world. Today's military handguns still carry echoes of Samson's creative touch. The whole idea of a stock that folds or slides in for easy carrying and special tasks is common now. The M4 Carbine, which is the main gun for United States troops these days, comes with a stock that telescopes and does the same job Samson's creation tackled back in 1944. The IK-47 and its many versions have options with folding stocks. Pretty much every current military rifle out there has a shorter model with a stock that folds or collapses. Frederick Samson never went looking for recognition because of what he invented. When the war ended, he went back to working on cars at General Motors. He earned quite a few patents for parts in transmissions and engine setups, but he hardly ever talked about what he did during the war with the carbine stock. When the Ordnance Group wanted to give him a special award as a civilian in 1946, he turned it down, telling them the praise should go to the troops who carried the gun, not the person who drew it up. Colonel Studler, the one who stood up for Samson's idea against all the office pushback, left the army in 1954 as a brigadier general. In the book he wrote and published in 1962, he said, "The folding stock for the carbine showed me that great ideas can pop up from anywhere. What the experts all agree on is frequently mistaken, and every now and then, the best thing a person in charge can do is pay attention to somebody who has nothing going for them except good old common sense and pure grit." In 1967, during a get-together for the 101st Airborne Division, a bunch of old soldiers gave Samson a special board with words on it. It said, "To Fred Samson, who handed us a gun we could count on. Thanks to you, we made it back home." Samson, 57 years old at the time, apparently broke down in tears when he saw what it said. He passed away in 1983 when he was 73 years old, pretty much unknown except among people who collect military items. The short notice about his death in the Dayton Daily News talked about his 40 years working at General Motors, but didn't say a word about the folding stock for the carbine that kept hundreds of people alive and changed how military guns are made for years to come. What we can learn from Samson's experience goes way beyond just stories from wars. New ideas often come from places you least expect. The guy who fixed cars and had zero military background spotted a trouble that the pros who built weapons completely overlooked. He found the bravery to go against what all the specialists thought and the drive to push through slow, stubborn office rules. He only pulled it off because he found someone willing to back him up. If Colonel Studler hadn't been ready to go against his own people, Samson's creation would have ended up forgotten in some drawer. Being a good leader can mean saying no to the pros and giving a shot to a thought from someone outside the circle. This tale also points out how much it costs when offices fight against fresh ways of doing things. If Samson's plan had gotten the green light back in 1943 when he first brought it up, many more lives could have been kept safe during the landings on D-Day. Groups that turn down new approaches just because they shake up the usual ways end up paying for it. And sometimes that price is paid with people's lives. These days, real M1 A1 carbines that still have their folding stocks are treasured by collectors. They go for 3 to 4 times as much money as regular M1 carbines. Museums about the military put them on display as proof of how clever Americans were during World War II. Companies that make things for civilians are still building the design for people who collect or shoot for fun. But the true lasting impact of the gun isn't sitting in display cases or private collections. It's in the basic rule that Samson made clear. When things aren't going right, when people's lives are on the line, when the pros all say it's not possible, every once in a while, the best way forward comes from somebody ready to brush off what everyone agrees on and just go make an improved version. Out in the thick hedges of Normandy, up in the frozen peaks of Korea, and deep in the jungles of Vietnam, American fighters held a gun that did its job because one single engineer wouldn't go along with the idea that rifles breaking was simply something you had to deal with in airborne work. That firm stand against putting up with what shouldn't be tolerated, That's the heart of the story about the folding stock for the carbine. And that's something valuable to keep in mind. No matter if you're coming up with weapons, starting companies, or simply working on fixing a trouble that everybody else has thrown in the towel on.
Every now and then, the smartest move you can make is tune out the specialists and go ahead and build the thing yourself. Words in original chunk, approximately 1,850. Words in my rewrite, approximately 1,950.